and welcome back to my channel. For those of you new here, hello, my name is Skylar. I'm a certified dog trainer and pet nutritionist. While scrolling through social media the other day, I saw that one of the accounts that I follow had shared an article about grain-free pet food and whether or not it causes heart disease, or DCM more specifically, dilated cardiomyopathy. This particular article caught my attention because the headline is "Hills Accused of Coordinated Scheme to Convince Consumers That Grain-Free Pet Food Increases Risk of DCM." This isn't my first time talking about DCM and grain-free pet foods. I have a video that I'll link up here as well as in the description all about my opinions of grain-free versus grain-inclusive pet food, as well as some of the pet food politics that goes into everything that we're going to be talking about today. Today we are going to just do a reaction to this article. I'm going to read all the way through it. We'll stop and talk about a few things along the way, and as always with this type of reaction video, it's to raise awareness for you guys. If this is something that you weren't aware of at all, hopefully you walk away with a little bit of extra information, and the more information that we as consumers have, typically the better we're able to make decisions for our pets that align with our own personal values, along with the help of educated professionals such as our veterinarians and nutrition specialists. And for those of you who would like to follow along, I will leave this article in the description down below. The headline reads, "Hills Accused of Coordinated Scheme to Convince Consumers That Grain-Free Pet Food Increases Risk of DCM." The case was filed on behalf of Keto Natural Pet Foods, a Utah-based pet food startup that manufactures low-carbohydrate dog food products. Hills in this instance refers to the brand that makes Hills Science Diet, which is a very popular vet-recommended food that's usually sold in your vet's office. Hills in this instance is referencing the company that makes things like Hills Science Diet, which is a very common veterinary pet food that they probably sell at your local veterinary office. A lawsuit filed against Hills Pet Nutrition Incorporated and other defendants alleges that they carried out a coordinated scheme to persuade American pet owners that the grain-free dog food products sold by many of Hills' competitors all increase the risk and severity of a deadly canine heart disease called dilated cardiomyopathy, according to a news release. Dilated cardiomyopathy is not a new condition. There's plenty of breeds that are predisposed to having dilated cardiomyopathy. Golden Retrievers are a big one. And this is also not the first time we've had a dilated cardiomyopathy, a DCM scare. Back in the 70s, there was a bunch of cats, unfortunately, that passed due to DCM, and in part because of that is where we found out that cats don't synthesize their own taurine. Taurine's an amino acid that is really important for proper heart function. Dogs can synthesize some of their own. There's still questions, especially after all of this, as to how much they can make on their own. But cats need taurine, which is it's amino acids found in meat. They need it from their prey, from their food. And so that was a big thing. When kibble became more popular, people were feeding their cats more kibble. The kibble didn't have enough meat in it, and it caused a lot of problems. So as a result of that, cats are considered obligate carnivores, and we've adjusted the amount of meat that our cats are getting so that it's safe. Or at least the amount of taurine that they're getting so that it's safe. The case was filed on behalf of Keto Natural Pet Foods, a Utah-based pet food startup that manufactures low-carbohydrate dog food products. The suit alleges that Keto Natural is one of the many smaller pet food brands that were damaged by the false association between its products and DCM. According to a press release from Wolf, Haldenstein, Adler, Freeman, and Hertz LLP, which filed the proposed class action litigation. Reuters reported that Keto Natural is seeking a class action status for at least several hundred companies. The $2.6 billion in damages sought would be the largest in the history of the U.S. pet food industry, said Thomas Burt, partner with Wolf Haldenstein. So this, so far, is claiming that Keto Naturals is kind of spearheading this, but they're wanting to go for a huge class action lawsuit that is going to include multiple other pet food companies. It's no secret that there are a lot of more boutique, I like to call them independent, pet food companies that specialize in grain-free dog food. And if you watched my last video about grain-free versus grain-inclusive, that makes a little bit more sense. The whole concept of grain-free pet food was created by an independent pet food company as a response to very, very common pet food allergies that we didn't have a response to. There was no real option commercially for pets with grain allergies or for chicken allergies, since so many pet foods at the time on the market had wheat and corn and rice and chicken and beef were kind of the options. Grain-free pet foods was also kind of a giant middle finger to the large corporations in a couple of ways, as a way of saying all of your pet foods are full of poor quality products, and so we're gonna make our own, and grain-free was also kind of a moniker for being better quality. That's not necessarily true, especially it's not necessarily true today, as both sides have really great brands that make really great grain-inclusive and grain-free foods. But grain-free versus grain-inclusive foods have always kind of been at odds with each other in that way. Again, there's great brands on both sides of the coin, and I think that both of them dogs really benefit from. It really is dependent on what your dog needs. In addition to Hill's, which is a subsidiary of Colgate-Palmolive Co., defendants include a group of academic veterinarians and organizations with financial ties to the company, according to a release from Wolf Heldenstein. Named in the suit are Hill's, the Morris Animal Foundation, the Mac Morris Institute, and 5 veterinarians. Colgate-Palmolive has not yet responded publicly to the suit, according to Reuters, and we'll update the story as we learn more, according to petsplusmag.com. The suit, Keto Natural Pet Foods versus Hill's Pet Nutrition, was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Court of Kansas on February 6th. Why would we bring veterinary groups and veterinarians into this? Hill's, especially Hill's Science Diet, is a very common vet food that doesn't necessarily make any implications about veterinarians specifically. Where the problem is these big companies also support veterinarian students. They support vet schools. They do scholarship programs. They mostly pump a ton of money into vet schools. And that's a big reason why so many vets know a lot about Purina or Hill's or Royal Canin, is because that's where the majority of their nutrition education comes from. They might learn some of the basics, absolutely, but if this company is taking the time to come sit in front of me and tell me all about their foods and how they work, I'm gonna have a much better understanding of that food and feel much more comfortable with that company, especially if they're telling me all of these other things about other brands potentially. Even regardless of that, if you're just giving me all of this information about your foods, you're gonna feel more comfortable recommending those foods to your clients or to your patients. Whereas if someone comes in and says that they feed this brand that you've never heard of before, what do you say? You don't know much about that brand, you don't know much about their ingredients or their sourcing or how it works with the body. So you're generally going to recommend the brand that you know more about. Another reason why we're bringing the vets into this is because the original study that cited the claim that grain-free foods increase the risk of DCM, that initial study was flawed. And we can't all have a study that's perfect. That's the hardest part about science. That's why we replicate it so many times. That's why we tweak it. That's why we try to get as specific as possible. But ultimately, that can be difficult, especially when we're working with animals where there's so many additional variables outside of our control. With the original study, it was peer-reviewed by a number of veterinarians once it got published, and there's been a lot of scrutiny around it because it worked with a very, very small sample size. A lot of the dogs in the original study are breeds or dogs themselves that are more predisposed to DCM, rather than it being strictly food related. There's a lot of other ways that it can be developed. And my personal biggest question mark is that generally it was separated into 2 categories when it came to foods, where you had vet foods and boutique foods. And those boutique foods covered everything from vegetarian dog foods, vegan dog foods, things more like Rachel Ray, all the way up to things more like carnivore, homemade dog foods. It provided such a large range in the quality of food, in the nutrition of the food, in who's making the food, whereas the other category was more like your Hill's, your Royal Canin, your Purina. I think that even with all of the other variables of, dogs predisposed to DCM being prevalent in the study, all of those things aside, I wish that all of those foods were broken down into better categories so we could really hone in on which foods were a problem rather than creating such a black and white thing. And then this is from the release itself. The scheme allegedly involved a wide variety of malfeasance committed by the defendants, most notably fraudulent misrepresenting case data about DCM to the United States Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. The FDA spent more than 5 years conducting a widely publicized investigation into a potential association between grain-free dog foods and DCM, only to suspend further investigation updates last year after announcing that it had not found sufficient data to establish a relationship between DCM and the products under investigation. The suit alleges that the FDA's DCM investigation was fraudulently induced by Hills-affiliated veterinarians at Tufts University and other major research institutions, all of which have received extensive funding from Hills-affiliated entities. The veterinarians allegedly caused the FDA to take drastic action by flooding the agency with hundreds of DCM case reports that were intentionally chosen to overrepresent the commonality of grain-free diets among dogs suffering from the disease. In short, my interpretation of that means that they're essentially claiming that Hills encouraged, incentivized a group of veterinarians to find a correlation between the two. They're also claiming that, additionally, a bunch of veterinarians got the FDA involved, where it publicized and blew this up to be a much bigger thing without necessarily the evidence to back it up, especially once the FDA got in there, used a bunch of resources, did some research, and couldn't find that correlation. The FDA's investigation received major media coverage in 2018 and 2019, sparking a panic over DCM that caused the market for grain-free pet foods to drop by billions of dollars. The suit alleges that Hills and its co-conspirators then stoked the panic by making false statements about the scientific evidence surrounding DCM, both to the veterinary community and the general public, as well as by manipulating the language of the academic papers, using front organizations to hide undisclosed payments to veterinary researchers, and creating Facebook groups and websites to amplify the misinformation and suppress dissent. So we're claiming that they did some really sketchy stuff in order to misrepresent facts and influence consumer habits, trying to get people to stop buying grain-free pet foods and switch over to their foods out of fear. According to the lawsuit, this scheme produced a shocking financial windfall for Hills, a company that has been steadily losing market share to grain-free competitors in the years preceding the controversy. In the 4 years immediately preceding the launch of the FDA's investigation, Hills lost 20% of its market share. In the 5 years since the investigation began, it has been arguably the fastest growing pet food company in the country. So again, we are claiming that Hills was losing a ton of money every year to these other grain-free independent pet food companies. And they are insinuating that Hills did this as a way to make more money. And they're also claiming that since all of the DCM grain-free stuff has come out, that Hills has been growing exponentially and is now considered one of the largest pet food brands. And from working in pet food, I do have a lot of people who are feeding Hills or have switched to Hills over the last 5 or so years. I think a big part of that is because it's often what veterinarians are recommending, just because, again, it's what they know the most about. They have that education on it. It is what their vet school and the company themselves may have encouraged them to recommend. I have found through working with clients, both as a dog trainer and in pet nutrition, that it's no longer, we recommend this for X, Y, and Z. It is now what's been told to me by these clients, that you would say whatever food you are feeding, and it would immediately be a case of that food is going to kill your dog, you need to feed this. I'm absolutely sure that not every single vet is like that, but this has become more common rhetoric that has been getting back to me, at least, over the last 5 or so years. The case was filed on behalf of Keto Natural Pet Foods, a Utah-based pet food startup that specializes in manufacturing low-carbohydrate dog food products. The suit alleges that Keto Naturals is one of the many small pet food brands that were damaged by the false association between its products and DCM. Evidence submitted as part of the new suit shows that many Keto Naturals customers stopped feeding the company's products to their dogs after being told by veterinarians that the products had been shown to raise the risk of canine DCM. According to Dr. Burt, pet food brands, such as Keto Naturals, are just one of several discrete groups that have been harmed by Hill's and its co-conspirators. We know that boutique pet food retailers and pet owners around the country were also damaged by the false idea that grain-free pet foods increased the risk of canine DCM. As we continue to investigate potential claims against Hill's and its co-conspirators, we urge anyone who believes they have been harmed by the misconduct described in the suit to contact our offices. So that is the end of the article. What does that all mean? Basically, an independent pet food company is claiming that Hill's created all of the craziness around grain-free pet foods in order to stop their declining company and make themselves more money, while also spearheading a frenzy and smear campaign against independent pet foods and grain-free foods as a whole. I think it's important to remember that this is a statement about a lawsuit that is being presented. We don't have the facts on it yet. The court certainly has not made a decision on any of this yet, and we're only reacting to it now to make you aware that this is happening in the world of pet food, and also use it as a jumping off point for other topics of conversation. This is a case that I am interested in following if it continues to progress, so if you'd like updates on that, give me a like and let me know. As well as in the comments, feel free to let me know what you think about all of this, with the caveat of we're a place for information, so we're not gonna fight in the comments. If someone decides to continue feeding grain-free and that's what their pet does best on and they feel very confident in that decision, that's fantastic. If someone decides to feed grain-inclusive because that's what their pet does best on and they're very, very confident in that decision, that's fantastic. As always, it's best to discuss any food changes with a veterinarian and a nutrition specialist, so that way we're doing what's best for your dog, as well as doing what you feel is going to be best. If you've not already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. I do a lot of dog training and nutrition discussions on here, and apparently we also react to pet food news over here, so if that's the reason you're here. About a month ago, I did a video on Purina and other pet foods possibly causing a mystery illness that's causing food refusal, vomiting, and seizures in dogs and cats. So if that's something you're interested in, I will leave that video, again, linked up here at the top as well as in the description. And with that, I will see you in my next video. Bye!